Smiled sweetly at my husband across the mediation table and said, I agree to your terms. Marcus actually had the audacity to look relieved, like I was doing him a favor, like the past 6 years of our marriage hadn't been me building his company from the ground up while he fucked my best friend in our bed. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, Claire, he said, and I wanted to laugh. Reasonable. That's what he'd called me in my first life, right before he'd taken everything. But he didn't know I'd already lived through this day once before. 3 months ago, I died in a car accident on Highway 101. I was 32 years old, divorced, broke, and broken. I'd lost the company I'd helped build, the house I'd decorated, and every cent of the fortune I'd helped accumulate because I'd been reasonable and agreed to mediate our divorce. Then I woke up in our bedroom 6 months earlier, Marcus's arm heavy across my waist, my phone buzzing with a text from Jessica. Can't. Wait to see you tonight. Girls' night. Jessica. My best friend since college. The woman who would be sleeping with my husband within 2 weeks. The woman who would stand beside him in mediation, her hand on his shoulder, her expensive engagement ring, bought with money that should have been half mine, glinting under the fluorescent lights. I'd stared at that text for a full minute before I understood. I'd been given a gift, a chance to do everything differently, and I'd taken it. The terms are fair, Marcus's lawyer Richard said now, sliding the papers across the table. He was a shark in a $1,000 suit, and he'd eviscerated me in my first life. You'll receive a modest settlement, keep your personal vehicle, and vacate the marital home within 30 days. Modest. The settlement was $50,000. The company I'd helped Marcus build from nothing was now worth $47 million. I think it's more than generous, given the circumstances. Marcus's mother, Patricia, chimed in from her seat beside her son. She'd never liked me, thought I was beneath her precious Marcus. In my first life, she'd convinced me that dragging things out in court would be unseemly, and that mediation was the dignified choice. Dignified. Right. My lawyer, David Chen, shifted beside me. He was young, hungry, and in my first life, I'd never met him. I'd used the lawyer Patricia recommended, a kindly old man who'd convinced me to accept mediation without ever mentioning that I was entitled to half of everything. This time, I'd found David 2 days after my rebirth. I'd walked into his office and said, I need someone who doesn't care about being dignified. I need someone who will fight like hell. He'd grinned and said, You've come to the right place. Now he caught my eye and I gave him the slightest nod. We'd rehearsed this. Claire, he said softly, playing his part perfectly, you don't have to agree to this. We can take this to court. You have rights. No, I made my voice small, defeated. The same voice I'd used in my first life when I'd been too tired and heartbroken to fight anymore. I just want it to be over. I'll sign. Marcus exhaled, and I saw the tension leave his shoulders. He'd been worried. He should have been terrified. Because what Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that David had filed our divorce petition in Superior Court 3 weeks ago, the day after I'd hired him. We weren't bound by mediation. This wasn't legally binding, this was theater. And I was about to give the performance of my lifetime. I appreciate your maturity, Richard said, the condescending prick. If you'll just sign here, here, and here. I picked up the pen, let it hover over the paper. You know, I said conversationally, it's funny how life works out. Marcus frowned. Claire, I really thought we had something special. Remember our wedding day, Marcus? You told me you'd love me forever. You said I was your partner, your equal. Claire, don't make this harder than it has to be, Patricia said sharply. I.S. ignored her. And Jessica. God, Jessica. My maid of honor, my best friend. I told her everything. Every dream, every fear, every insecurity. I looked at Marcus, let him see the knowledge in my eyes. Every detail about our marriage, our sex life, what you liked, what you didn't. Marcus went pale. Good. He was starting to understand that I knew. That's enough, Richard said. Mrs. Chen, either sign the agreement or Athanis. Oh, I'll sign, I said brightly. I scrawled my signature across the bottom of the page with a flourish. There, all done. You win. Marcus's shoulders sagged with relief again. Idiot. However, I continued, setting down the pen, I should probably mention something. David stood right on cue. My client has been more than gracious in attending this mediation. However, I feel it's only fair to disclose that we filed a petition for dissolution of marriage in Superior Court 3 weeks ago. This mediation, while a good faith effort at resolution, is not legally binding on either party. The room went silent. Richard's face turned purple. You did what? We filed in Superior Court, David repeated calmly. Case number FC 2024-8847. You should have received notification last week. We received no such. Richard fumbled with his briefcase, pulling out stacks of papers. I watched him with detached amusement as he found the envelope still sealed. He'd been so confident in his mediation strategy that he hadn't even bothered to open all his mail. Marcus was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Claire, what the hell? You were saying something about being reasonable, I asked sweetly. About being dignified? Patricia's face had gone from smug to horrified. You can't do this. We had an agreement. No, I corrected. You had a plan to screw me over. Again. I let that last word hang in the air, saw the confusion flicker across Marcus's face. He couldn't understand how I knew what was going to happen. And he never would. David opened his own briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. While we're all here, perhaps we should discuss the actual assets in question. Mrs. Chen has provided documentation showing her involvement in the founding and building of Chen Digital Solutions, including financial contributions, business planning, client acquisition, and operational management. That company is mine, Marcus said, his voice rising. I built that from nothing. From nothing? I laughed, and it felt good. It felt powerful. Marcus, I used my entire trust fund as seed capital. $200,000 of my money started that company. My contacts got us our first 3 clients. I ran operations for 4 years while you played visionary. You can't prove that, Patricia snapped. David smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Actually, we can. We have bank transfers, emails, contracts with Mrs. Chen's signature, testimony from former employees, and security footage from the office showing Mrs. Chen working 80-hour weeks while Mr. Chen arrived at 10 and left at 3. He slid a stack of photos across the table. I'd spent weeks compiling evidence this time, documenting everything I'd ignored in my first life, because I'd loved my husband and trusted him to do right by me. What a fucking joke. Richard was flipping through the photos, and I watched the color drain from his face. He was good, but he wasn't good enough to spin this. Not in court. Furthermore, David continued, clearly enjoying himself now, we have evidence of Mr. Chen's adultery, which under state law can affect the division of assets, particularly when marital funds were used to support the affair. What affair? Marcus said, but his voice cracked. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table, pulled up the photo album I'd labeled evidence, and turned it to face him. There he was, my darling husband, with Jessica kissing, outside her apartment, his hand on her ass in the parking garage at his office. The two of them having dinner at the expensive restaurant he'd told me we couldn't afford. All dated, all time-stamped, all from the last 3 months since I'd come back. See, in my first life, I'd suspected. I'd seen the signs, but convinced myself I was paranoid, crazy, insecure. This time, I'd hired a private investigator the day after my rebirth. I'd documented everything. You've been having an affair with Jessica Morrison for approximately 3 months, I said calmly. You've taken her to hotels, charging them to our joint credit card, by the way, and you've given her jewelry purchased with funds from our joint account. David has calculated that you've spent roughly $45,000 of marital assets on your mistress. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. Patricia looked like she might faint. This is a setup, Richard said, but there was no conviction in his voice. You can't seriously expect, David interrupted smoothly, thus, that when this goes before Judge Morrison, no relation to the mistress, in case you were wondering, she's going to look very favorably on my client's claim to 50% of all marital assets, including Chen Digital Solutions, the marital home, and all investment accounts. In fact, given the circumstances, we may argue for 60%. 60? Patricia shrieked. That's insane! That's the law, Mrs. Chen. Your son committed adultery and used marital funds to support his affair. He's also attempting to defraud my client of her rightful share of a business she helped build. A judge tends to frown on that sort of thing. I stood up, smoothed down my skirt. Well, this has been fun, but I have somewhere to be. Claire, wait! Marcus reached for my arm and I stepped back. Don't touch me. You lost that right when you fucked Jessica in our bed. Oh, and speaking of Jessica, I pulled up another photo on my phone. This is her, employment contract with Chen Digital Solutions. The one you had her sign 3 weeks ago, director of marketing, $200,000 salary, benefits, stock options. I'd found that little gem 2 days ago. In my first life, I'd never known he'd hired her. I'd been so destroyed by the divorce that I'd cut contact with everyone, moved to a different city, tried to start over. I'd died not knowing that he'd set Jessica up with a cushy job in my company, while I'd struggled to find work in a market where I had a 6-year gap in my resume. You hired your mistress, I said, my voice cold, using marital assets, gave her stock options that are legally half mine. David, how does that complicate things? Considerably, David said. We'll be arguing that the stock options granted to Ms. Morrison are invalid and should be redistributed to Mrs. Chen as part of the asset division. Jessica. I almost wished she could be here to see this, but she was at work, at my company, probably planning what color to paint the office she'd stolen from me. She'd find out soon enough. When the sheriff showed up with the restraining order I'd filed this morning, barring her from company property, pending the resolution of the divorce. When she discovered that her employment contract was being challenged in court. When Marcus could no longer afford to keep her in the lifestyle she'd gotten accustomed to. Claire, please, Marcus said, and he actually had tears in his eyes. Can we talk about this privately? No. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. We can work through this. No, I repeated. We can't. Because this isn't about Jessica, Marcus. It's about you looking at me across this table and thinking you could screw me over. It's about your mother convincing me that mediation was the dignified choice when really it was just the cheapest way to steal from me. It's about every time you made me feel small, stupid, or worthless. Every time you took credit for my work. Every time you made me doubt myself. You did, constantly, and I let you because I loved you and I wanted to believe you loved me back. But you don't love me, Marcus. You love what I can do for you, the money I brought, the clients I landed, the stability I provided while you played CEO. I picked up my purse. David gathered his files. See you in court, I said cheerfully. Richard found his voice. Mrs. Chen, I strongly advise you to reconsider. Court battles are expensive, lengthy, and emotionally draining. Surely we can reach a reasonable compromise. Reasonable, I repeated, tasting the word. You know what? You're right. Let me make you a reasonable offer. I'll take 55% of all assets, including the company. Marcus keeps his car and his personal belongings. Jessica gets fired immediately and forfeits all stock options. And everyone involved signs an NDA preventing them from discussing the details of this divorce or my involvement in Chen Digital Solutions. That's insane, Patricia shouted. You can't. Or, I continued, we go to court, drag this out for months, air every piece of dirty laundry, and believe me, I have a lot more where this came from, and I go for 70%. Your choice. Marcus was shaking his head. Claire, this isn't like you. You're not vindictive. You're kind and sweet and weak, I supplied. Easy to manipulate? Willing to be reasonable? I was going to say forgiving. I was forgiving. In another life, I was so forgiving that I let you and your mother and your shark of a lawyer convince me to accept $50,000 and walk away from 6 years of my life. I was so forgiving that I spent the next year working 3 jobs just to make rent while you and Jessica lived in the house I decorated and ran the company I built. Marcus's face went white. How do you can't know that? We haven't even, I smiled. Lucky guess, but see, that's the thing about you, Marcus. You're predictable. You've always been predictable. I knew exactly what you'd do if I didn't fight back. And that's why I hired the best divorce attorney in the state and documented every single one of your moves for the last 3 months. 3 months? Richard latched onto that. You've been planning this for 3 months? Before you even had evidence of an affair? Shit, I'd said too much. But David smoothly intervened. My client had suspicions about her husband's fidelity and wanted to protect herself. That's not a crime, counselor. It's prudent. You set me up, Marcus said, horror dawning in his eyes. This whole time, you've been setting me up. No, I corrected. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. You set yourself up the moment you decided to fuck my best friend and try to steal my company. Patricia stood abruptly. I won't listen to this language. Then leave, I said simply. But understand this, I'm not the woman you thought I was. I'm not going to smile and nod and accept. Whatever scraps you decide to throw me, I'm going to fight for every single thing I'm owed and I'm going to win. You can't win against us, Patricia hissed. We have resources, connections, and I have the law on my side. Plus, I paused, savoring this moment. I'd been saving this particular bomb for the right time. I have your son's personal emails to Jessica where he discusses hiding assets from me. That's fraud, Patricia. Criminal fraud. The room went dead silent. You're bluffing, Richard said, but he didn't sound certain. David pulled out another folder. Email dated March 15th from Marcus Chen to Jessica Morrison. Don't worry about Claire finding out about the offshore account. I set it up in the Caymans under the LLC. She has no idea it exists. Email dated March 22nd. Moved another $500K to the offshore. Once the divorce is final, we'll have more than enough to start our new life. I watched Marcus's face crumble. Watched Richard realize his client had just committed a felony. Watched Patricia understand that her son wasn't just an adulterer, he was a criminal. How did you... Marcus started. Your password is Jessica's birthday, I said flatly. You're not as clever as you think you are. In my first life, I'd never thought to check his email. I'd trusted him. This time, I'd waited until he was in the shower, used my Rebirth knowledge of his password, and forwarded everything to my own secure account. That's illegal, Patricia shrieked. You can't use evidence obtained from a joint email account set up on a joint computer in the marital home. David smiled. Actually, we can. And we will. Unless, of course, Mr. Chen would like to rethink his position on asset division. Marcus slumped in his chair. He looked 10 years older than he had at the start of this meeting. What do you want? I told you, I said. 55% of everything, including the company. Jessica gets fired and forfeits her options. You transfer ownership of all hidden assets and everyone signs an NDA. I'll be left with almost nothing, Marcus said. You'll have 45% of a 47 million company, Marcus. That's more than 21 million, hardly nothing. And it's more than I would have gotten if I'd been reasonable. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment he understood. You know something. You know what's going to happen. That's impossible, but you do. I leaned in close. What I know is that you're a cheating, lying fraud who tried to steal from me. What I know is that you underestimated me. What I know is that you're going to agree to my terms or I'm going to destroy you. Claire, my lawyer will send over the amended settlement agreement, I said, straightening up. You have 48 hours to review and sign. After that, we proceed with litigation, and I promise you, Marcus, you don't want that. Because I have so much more than emails and photos. I have testimony from your former business partner about how you forced him out. I have evidence of tax fraud. I have documentation of kickbacks and bribes. I have everything I need to not only take you to divorce court, but to put you in prison. That was a slight exaggeration. I had some evidence, but probably not enough for criminal charges. But Marcus didn't know that, and he was scared enough to believe it. 48 hours, David repeated, handing Richard a business card. We'll be in touch. We left them sitting there, shell-shocked and broken. I didn't look back. In the elevator, David let out a low whistle. That was brutal. That was necessary, I corrected. The offshore accounts, that was brilliant. How did you know to look for those? I thought about my first life. About dying broke and alone, wondering where all the money had gone. About the lawsuit I'd filed 2 months before my death, trying to prove Marcus had hidden assets. The lawsuit that had been dismissed because I had no evidence. This time, I had evidence. This time, I'd known exactly what to look for. Lucky guess, I said. David laughed. You're the luckiest guesser I've ever met, and the scariest client. Remind me never to get on your bad side. You're safe, as long as you keep winning. Oh, we're going to win. They'll sign the agreement. Richard knows they can't beat this in court. We stepped out onto the street, into the bright afternoon sunshine. I tilted my face up, letting the warmth wash over me. In my first life, I'd walked out of mediation feeling defeated and broken. This time, I felt alive. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I can't believe what you're doing to Marcus. I thought you were better than this. Jessica, of course. I typed back, check your employment status, and maybe don't fuck your best friend's husband next time. I blocked the number before she could respond. Lunch? David asked. Lunch, I agreed. We went to the expensive restaurant where it says. Marcus had taken Jessica. I ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu and charged it to our joint credit card. One last fuck you before I closed that account. Over wine and steak, David walked me through the next steps. The court filings, the discovery process, the deposition schedule. They might try to settle before we get to deposition, he warned. Richard's smart enough to know that Marcus will fall apart on the stand. Good, I said. Let them squirm. You really hate him, don't you? I considered that. Did I hate Marcus? In my first life, I'd loved him so much that losing him had destroyed me. This time, I don't hate him, I said slowly. I pity him. He had someone who loved him unconditionally, who supported his dreams, who built a life with him, and he threw it all away for what? Someone younger, someone more exciting? It's pathetic. Still, David said, this level of revenge, most people couldn't pull it off. You've been 3 steps ahead this entire time. I had good motivation. The affair? I thought about the car accident, the moment of impact, the knowledge that I was dying alone and broke with nothing to show for 6 years of marriage except pain. Something like that, I said. My phone rings. Marcus. I declined the call. He called again and again. On the 4th call, I answered. What? Claire, please, can we just talk? Face to face, without the lawyers? No. I love you. I know I fucked up, but I love you. We can fix this. You don't love me, Marcus. You love the idea of me. The version of me that was convenient and supportive and didn't ask questions. But I'm done being that person. I'll end things with Jessica. Right now. I'll fire her. I'll block her number. Whatever you want. I don't want you back, I said, and realized it was true. In my first life, part of me had still hoped, even at the end, that he'd come back. That he'd realize his mistake and choose me. This time I didn't want him. I wanted justice. Then what do you want? I want what I'm owed. Sign the settlement agreement, Marcus. Move on with your life. I'm moving on with mine. I hung up. David was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're different, he said, from most of my clients. Usually people in your situation. They're emotional, they're desperate, they're hoping for reconciliation right up until the final decree. But you're cold, calculated. It's like you already know how this ends. I did know how it ended. In my first life, it had ended with me broken and Marcus triumphant. This time, the roles were reversed. I know what I want, I said simply, and I'm going to get it. We finished lunch and David walked me to my car, the modest sedan I'd driven since college, while Marcus drove the BMW I'd helped him buy. They'll sign, David said confidently. Probably by tomorrow. Richard knows a losing case when he sees one. And if they don't? Then we go to war. And we win anyway. It'll just be messier. I smiled. I don't mind messy. David laughed. I believe you. Talk soon, Claire. I drove home, not to the house I'd shared with Marcus, but to the small apartment I'd rented the week after my rebirth. I'd moved out immediately, citing Marcus's affair as grounds for him to continue paying the mortgage while I established separate residence. He'd fought it, of course, claimed I was abandoning the marital home. But David had shut that down quickly with photos of Jessica's car in our driveway at 2 in the morning. The apartment was small, but mine. I'd furnished it simply. Nothing like the carefully curated aesthetic of the house. This was functional, temporary, a place to regroup and plan my next move. Because taking back what Marcus stole was only step 1. Step 2 was rebuilding my life. I opened my laptop and pulled up the business plan I'd been working on. Chen Digital Solutions had been my baby once, but I'd let Marcus take credit. This time I was going to build something of my own, something he couldn't touch. My phone buzzed with an email. David, Richard just called. They want to talk settlement. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I think we've got them. I wrote back, perfect. No mercy, none, he confirmed. I spent the evening refining my business plan, reaching out to contacts, laying groundwork. In my first life, I'd been too broken to fight. This time, I was building an empire. At midnight, my phone rang again. Jessica. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. What do you want? How could you? She was crying. We were best friends, Claire. How could you do this to me? How could I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Jessica, you fucked my husband. You've been sleeping with him for months. And you're asking how I could do this to you? It just happened. We didn't mean for it to... Bullshit. You didn't trip and fall on his dick, Jessica. You made a choice. You chose to betray me. And now you're facing the consequences. I'm going to lose my job. Marcus can't afford to keep me anymore. Good. You should lose your job. You never deserved it in the first place. Please, Claire, I'm begging you, don't do this. I'll leave Marcus. I'll disappear. Just don't take everything from him. Why not? He was going to take everything from me. What are you talking about? The mediation was fair. The mediation was a scam, Jessica, and you knew it. You were probably there helping him hide assets, weren't you? Silence. Oh my God, I breathed. You were. You helped him set up the offshore accounts. You helped him plan how to screw me over. We thought Marcus said you'd be fine, that you'd get the settlement and move on and what? Die alone and broke while you two lived happily ever after in my house, running my company? It's not your company. It is my company, I shouted, and then took a breath, got control. I started it with him, Jessica, my money, my contacts, my work, and he tried to steal it from me. With your help. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I hung up and blocked her number too. The next morning, I dressed carefully. A power suit, professional but feminine. Hair pulled back, minimal makeup. I looked competent, trustworthy. Nothing like the broken woman Marcus expected. David met me outside Richard's office. Ready? Ready. We walked in together, and I saw immediately that we'd won. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept. Patricia wasn't there, probably too ashamed to show her face. Richard looked resigned. My client is prepared to accept your terms, Richard said without preamble. 55% of all assets, including Chen Digital Solutions. Termination of Jessica Morrison's employment. Transfer of all hidden assets. NDA for all parties. Smart choice, David said. However, Richard continued, we have some additional requests. No, I said flatly. Says, Mrs. Chen, you haven't even heard. I don't care. The terms are the terms. Non-negotiable. Marcus leaned forward. Claire, please, I need some liquidity. If I give you 55% of the company, I'll need to sell my shares to pay you out, and that will tank the valuation. Not my problem. It could be a phased payout, David suggested, because he was a better person than I was. 30% now, 25% over the next 2 years. That gives Mr. Chen time to maintain company operations and generate the necessary capital. I didn't want to agree. I wanted to take everything, burn it all down, leave Marcus with nothing. But David was right. If Marcus had to liquidate immediately, it would hurt the company valuation, which would hurt my payout. Fine, I said, wait. 30% now, the remaining 25% in quarterly installments over 2 years. Secured by a lien on his remaining shares. If he misses a payment, I get full ownership. Richard calculated quickly. That's still over $14 million upfront. He'll have to liquidate some assets. Maybe that offshore account he was planning to hide from me? Marcus flinched. Additionally, David said, pulling out another document, we want a clause specifying that if Mr. Chen sells the company or takes it public within the next 5 years, Mrs. Chen receives an additional 15% of the sale price or IPO valuation. That's extortion, Richard protested. That's fair compensation for building the company, David countered. Without Mrs. Chen's early contributions, there would be no company to sell. This protects her long-term interests. They argued back and forth while I watched Marcus. He looked defeated, broken, good. Finally, Richard sighed. We accept all terms. Including the NDA, I pressed. Including the NDA. My client will not discuss the details of this divorce or Mrs. Chen's involvement in the company. And Jessica Morrison's termination is effective immediately? Today, Marcus said quietly. I'll have security escort her out this afternoon. I felt a flash of vindictive pleasure at that image. Jessica being walked out of the office in front of everyone. The humiliation, the shame. Then we have a deal, David said. Richard pushed the amended settlement agreement across the table. It was 50 pages of legalese, but I read every word. David had done good work. Every loophole closed, every asset accounted for, every protection in place. I signed my name with a flourish. Marcus signed next, his hand shaking. One more thing, I said as we stood to leave. I want my wedding ring back. Marcus looked down at his left hand where the platinum band I'd given him still sat. Slowly, he pulled it off and set it on the table. I picked it up, felt the weight of it. In my first life, I'd thrown my ring into the ocean in a fit of grief. This time, I was going to pawn it and donate the money to a women's shelter. Goodbye, Marcus, I said. He looked at me with something like pleading in his eyes. Claire, goodbye, I repeated and walked out. In the elevator, David let out a whoop. We did it! Holy shit, Claire, we actually did it! I smiled. You doubted we would? No, but 55%. And the kicker if he sells, you're going to be incredibly wealthy. I already was, I pointed out. He just tried to steal it from me. The elevator dinged and we stepped out into the lobby. The sun was shining. Birds were singing. It was a beautiful day. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Chen, Digital Solutions Director of Marketing, terminated amid divorce scandal. That was fast. Marcus must have called ahead. Do you feel better? David asked as we stood on the sidewalk. Now that it's over? I thought about that. Did I feel better? In my first life, the end of my marriage had felt like the end of the world. This time, I feel free, I said honestly. What's next for you? I thought about my business plan, about the company I was going to build, about the life I was going to live. Everything, I said. The wire transfer hit my account 3 weeks later. $14.2 million. The first payment. I stared at the number on my screen, and for the first time since my rebirth, I felt tears prick my eyes. Not from sadness, from relief. In my first life, I'd struggled, worked 3 jobs just to make rent, eaten ramen for dinner more nights than not, wondered if I'd ever recover from the financial devastation of my divorce. This time, I had more money than I'd ever dreamed of, and it was mine. Earned by my work, my planning, my refusal to be a victim. I transferred $1 million to my new business account, another $2 million to a high-yield savings account. The rest went into investments, diversified, secure, growing. Then I treated myself to the one luxury I denied myself in my first life. I bought a house, not a mansion, not something ostentatious. A beautiful craftsman in a quiet neighborhood with a garden and a reading nook and a home office where I could build my empire. I closed on it 2 months after the divorce was finalized, stood in the empty living room and felt, for the first time in 2 lives, truly at peace. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Claire Chen? A woman's voice. Ma Chen But's voice. Professional. This is Sarah Mitchell from TechCrunch. I'm working on a story about Chen Digital Solutions, and I was hoping to get a comment from you about your role in the company's founding. I smiled. The NDA prevented Marcus from discussing my contributions, but it didn't prevent me from discussing them, and it certainly didn't prevent journalists from investigating. I'd be happy to talk, I said. The article ran a week later. The woman behind Chen Digital, how Claire Chen built a 47 million company before her divorce. It detailed my early investments, my client acquisition strategies, my operational management. It quoted former employees who confirmed my role. It showed email threads and contracts with my name on them. Marcus called me 14 times that day. I didn't answer. Richard sent a cease and desist letter claiming I'd violated the NDA. David sent back a response explaining that I'd disclosed only factual information about my own contributions, which was not restricted by the agreement. The story went viral. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the woman who'd been erased from her own company's history. I gave 3 more interviews, each one carefully calibrated, each one truthful but devastating. Marcus's reputation tanked. The business community started asking questions. If he'd tried to cheat his own wife, who else had he cheated? His former business partner, the one I'd mentioned having testimony from, came forward with his own story. Other clients started reviewing their contracts more carefully. Suddenly, Chen Digital Solutions was facing audits and lawsuits. I watched from a distance, building my own company. I'd named it Phoenix Digital. Rising from the ashes seemed appropriate. I poached 3 of Marcus's best employees, offered them equity, good benefits, and a work environment that didn't involve sleeping with the boss. I landed my first major client 4 months after my divorce was finalized, then another, then 3 more. 6 months later, I got a call from Marcus. "You're destroying me," he said without preamble. "No," I corrected, "you destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. I can't make the next payment. The company is hemorrhaging clients. I might have to declare bankruptcy. Then I'll take full ownership of Chen Digital Solutions," I said calmly, as specified in our agreement. "Claire, please. You had a chance to do right by me, Marcus. Twice, if you count my first." I stopped. He didn't need to know about that. "You had a chance to be fair and you chose to be greedy. Now you're facing the consequences." "I'll lose everything." "Welcome to my world." Or at least, what would have been my world if I'd been reasonable. "What do you want? Money? Public apology? I'll do whatever I want you to understand what you did to me. I want you to feel what I felt, and I want you to know that you did this to yourself." I hung up. Chen Digital Solutions declared bankruptcy 2 months later. I acquired the company for pennies on the dollar, absorbed the remaining good employees into Phoenix Digital, and sold off the rest. Marcus got a job at a mid-level marketing firm. Last I heard, he was making $80,000 a year. Jessica moved to another state. Patricia stopped sending me Christmas cards. And me? Phoenix Digital is valued at $120 million and growing. I'm on the cover of Forbes this month. The article calls me The Phoenix Rising, How One Woman Turned Betrayal into a Business Empire. I have a corner office with a view of the city, a team of brilliant, loyal employees. A healthy dating life, nothing serious yet, but I'm in no hurry. A beautiful home, financial security, freedom. Everything I lost in my first life, I've reclaimed in this one. Everything Marcus tried to steal, I've taken back tenfold. Last week, I got an invitation to speak at a conference for women entrepreneurs. The topic? Rebuilding after betrayal. I accepted. Because that's the thing about Rebirth. It's not just about revenge, it's about becoming the person you were always meant to be. The person who doesn't accept reasonable when they deserve fair. The person who fights back, the person who wins. I lived one life as a victim. This time, I'm living as a victor, and it feels fucking incredible. The conference is in a hotel ballroom packed with women who've been where I was, betrayed, underestimated, pushed down. I stand at the podium and look out at them, and I see myself in their faces, the pain, the anger, the determination. I'm going to tell you something that might sound crazy, I begin, but I promise you it's true. You already know how to fight back. You already have everything you need to rebuild. You just need permission to use it. I tell them about Marcus, about the mediation, about the moment I decided to stop being reasonable and start being ruthless. I don't tell them about the rebirth. That secret stays with me. But I tell them everything else. The evidence gathering, the strategic planning, the moment in the mediation room when I watched my husband's face crumble. The thing about betrayal, I say, is that it shows you who people really are. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You have two choices. You can let it break you, or you can let it transform you. I see women nodding, some crying. I chose transformation. I chose to fight, and I won. Not because I was smarter or stronger or more deserving, but because I refused to accept less than I was owed. After the speech, women line up to talk to me. They share their stories, their pain, their plans for revenge or recovery. I give advice where I can. David's contact information when they need a lawyer, encouragement when they need strength. One woman, probably in her 60s, takes my hand. My husband left me after 40 years of marriage, took everything. I thought my life was over. It's not, I tell her firmly. It's just beginning. You have knowledge, experience, skills he doesn't even understand. Use them. She smiles through her tears. Thank you. As I watch her walk away, I think about my first life. About dying at 32, broke and alone, thinking I'd lost everything. I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost one battle, one life. But I'd won the war. That night, back in my beautiful house, I pour myself a glass of expensive wine and sit in my reading nook. Pull up the news on my tablet. There's an article about Chen Digital's bankruptcy, about how the company that was once valued at 47 million sold for less than 2 million. There's a quote from Marcus. Sometimes businesses fail. It's part of the risk of entrepreneurship. No mention of the fraud, the hidden assets, the affair, the attempted theft. Just a bland corporate statement from a failed CEO. I could be angry about that. About the way he's trying to rewrite history, to make himself the victim of market forces rather than his own greed. But I'm not angry, because I know the truth, and so does everyone who matters. My phone buzzes. A text from David. Saw the article, classy statement from Marcus. Almost makes you forget he's a criminal. I write back. Almost. How does it feel, he asks. Having everything you wanted? I think about that. Do I have everything I wanted? In my first life, what I wanted was Marcus's love, his respect, his partnership. This time, what I wanted was justice, revenge, victory. And I got all three. But more than that, I got myself back. The version of me that existed before, I let Marcus convince me I was less than I was. Before I let his mother convince me that asking for what I deserved was unseemly. Before I let society convince me that being kind meant being weak. Feels like freedom, I text back. Good, David responds. You earned it. I set down my phone and look around my home, my sanctuary, my empire. In my first life, I agreed to the mediation terms. I was reasonable, I was dignified, I was destroyed. This life, I agreed to the mediation terms, but my lawyer had already filed in Superior Court. I knew what they were planning. I knew how to beat them. I knew because I'd lived through the alternative, and I used that knowledge to take back everything that should have been mine. Some people might call that unfair. They might say I had an advantage that Marcus never had a chance. To them, I say Marcus had every chance. He had a loyal wife, a successful business, a comfortable life, and he chose to throw it all away for an affair and a fraud scheme. I just made sure he paid for it. A year later, Phoenix Digital acquires a major competitor. The deal makes national news. I'm profiled in the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Inco magazine. They all ask the same question. How did you do it? How did you rebuild so quickly after such a devastating divorce? And I give them the same answer. I knew what I was worth, and I refused to accept anything less. What I don't tell them is that I had a preview of the alternative, that I lived through the version where I accepted less, where I was reasonable, where I died broke and alone. That knowledge, that glimpse of the future that could have been, is what drove me. Every decision, every strategy, every moment of ruthlessness. I'd lived the other life. I knew how it ended. This time, I was writing a different ending, and it's a bestseller. Marcus reaches out one more time 2 years after our divorce. An email, not a call. Claire, I know I have no right to contact Bapsaz. You? I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to say that I'm sorry for everything. For the affair, for trying to cheat you, for underestimating you. I've had a lot of time to think about what I lost. Not the company or the money, you. The person who believed in me when no one else did. The person who built something amazing with me. The person I threw away. I know it's too late for apologies. I know you've moved on, built something incredible without me. I just wanted you to know that I see now what you always were. Brilliant, strong, unstoppable. I'm sorry I never saw it before. Marcus, I read the email 3 times, then I delete it without responding. Some people don't deserve second chances. Some people don't deserve closure. Some people just deserve to wonder, for the rest of their lives, what they could have had if they hadn't been so stupid. Marcus is one of those people. And I'm too busy building my empire to care. 5 years after my rebirth, Phoenix Digital goes public. IPO valuation, $2.3 billion. I ring the opening bell at the stock exchange, surrounded by my team, my board, my investors. The cameras flash, the champagne flows, everyone wants to know my secret. Hard work, I tell them. Vision. Refusing to give up. All true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I died once, poor and broken. And when I came back, I decided that would never happen again. The whole truth is that I agreed to mediation terms that would have destroyed me, but my lawyer had already filed in superior court. The whole truth is that I'm not better than Marcus because I'm smarter or more talented. I'm better because I had a preview, because I lived through his betrayal twice, because I used that knowledge to ensure that this time I won. Is that fair? Maybe not. Do I care? Not even a little. Because in my first life, I played by the rules. I was fair, I was kind, I was reasonable, and I lost everything. This time, I played to win. And winning feels fucking incredible. That night, after the IPO celebration, I go home to my house, the one I bought with my first divorce settlement payment. I pour myself a glass of wine and stand on my balcony looking out at the city lights. I think about the woman I was in my first life. The one who trusted too much, loved too much, gave too much. She's gone now. She died in a car accident on Highway 101, broke and alone. I'm what came after. I'm the phoenix that rose from those ashes. I'm the woman who knew better, who planned ahead, who refused to be a victim. I'm the woman who agreed to mediation terms while my lawyer filed in superior court, and I'm the woman who won. My phone buzzes. A message from David. Congrats on the IPO. You did it. Everything you said you would. I smile and text back. We did it. Couldn't have done it without you. So what's next? He asks. World domination? Already working on it, I reply. And I am, because here's what I learned from living 2 lives. You only get what you fight for. You only keep what you protect. And you only win if you refuse to lose. I fought, I protected, I refused. And now I have everything. The company, the money, the respect, the freedom. Everything Marcus tried to take from me, I took back. And then I built something he could never touch. In my first life, I agreed to mediation terms and lost everything. In this life, I agreed to mediation terms, but my lawyer had already filed in superior court. That made all the difference. That changed everything. That saved my life. And I will never, ever forget what it felt like to watch Marcus's face when he realized I'd won. It was the sweetest moment of my 2 lives, and it was just the beginning.
Nobody tell the man babies that Rogaine, etc. is gender-affirming care. No, they don't like that. They don't like that. But it is. Right, exactly, B. Exactly. I think we should be able to be all boobies out. Kryptonite. Oh. Body modification, my beloved. Oh, no stripping. It's the act of stripping that is prohibited. That's interesting. You gotta. Whoa. What the hell? No. No. What the hell? Hey, stop that. Now it's just playing this. That's not what I want. That's not what I That's not what I asked for. So, sorry if you hear the same song again that you've already heard. Omerta. Dad's uncomfy. Okay. Rest of family's fine. Okay. It's a thing in Denmark, Germany, France, and Spain. I wasn't going to comment. Silently stewing. I can feel it emanating from the basement. The look on my face, that's all I need. Yeah. A sensory thing. That's interesting, Mandy. Have you found one that is you found certain ones that